I've always been the one in the background, never the center of attention, never the one who gets the accolades. Growing up in the quiet suburbs of Maryland, I was the quiet one, the one who blended into the walls. My family, especially my parents, had their eyes always on my older brother, Andrew. He was the golden child, the one everyone looked to. Andrew was an attorney, a high flyer with a career that soared. There was always something for him to brag about: promotions, prestigious cases, luxurious vacations to Europe. His office was on the top floor of a glass building in the heart of the city, and he drove a brand new BMW. It was hard not to feel like I was just in his shadow. And then there was me. I worked as an office assistant at a small marketing firm. My office was cramped, a dull beige cubicle tucked in the corner of a forgotten floor. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't a career anyone would envy. It didn't make for exciting conversation at family dinners. Every time someone asked about my job, I could see their polite smiles falter as I said, "I'm an assistant. I help with marketing research and reports." My parents tried to be supportive. I could tell they wanted to be proud of me, but there was always that unspoken comparison between me and Andrew. "Emily's doing well in her little job," my mom would say, trying to sound reassuring, but her voice lacked the conviction I heard when she talked about Andrew. And Andrew, always the smug older brother, would chime in, "She'll be fine. But let's be real, Emily, you're not going to change the world from behind a desk." I remember that moment so clearly. We were having dinner at my parents' house. Andrew had just returned from a business trip to Paris, his suitcase still on the floor by the front door. I'd just mentioned a small project I'd worked on at my firm, something I was proud of. I wasn't asking for recognition, but I wanted them to know I was doing something meaningful. "That's nice, Emily," my father said distractedly, wiping his mouth with a napkin. "But Andrew just closed a multi-million-dollar deal with a huge client. I think that's what matters most." I smiled, a smile that felt like it might break my face. I could feel the sting of it deep in my chest, but I didn't show it. I never did. I nodded, pushing my food around on my plate, trying to swallow down the disappointment. I'd gotten used to it by then, the casual dismissal. I'd learned to ignore it. After all, I had my life, my quiet, predictable life, and for a while, I was okay with that. At least I told myself I was. I could bury myself in my work, in my small victories that no one would ever truly understand. I found comfort in the routine, the small things. Waking up early, drinking my coffee in silence. The hum of the office as I typed away at reports. It wasn't much, but it was enough. But then one day, everything changed. I don't know when it happened. Maybe it was the day I realized my own worth was more than just a footnote in Andrew's success story. Maybe it was when I started to see my life for what it was, not just the background to his drama, but a story in its own right, full of potential, full of possibility. But I'll be honest, I didn't really see it coming. I didn't realize how far I'd let myself be overlooked until one fateful phone call turned everything upside down. And that's where the real story begins. The story of how everything I thought I knew about myself and my place in the world would change in the blink of an eye. But looking back, I can't help but wonder, why did it take me so long to recognize my own power? How much of our lives do we let others define for us before we decide to take control? It's a question I still ask myself, one that echoes through my decisions every day. The family crisis. It all began at Andrew's wedding. I had been looking forward to the event, despite the growing distance between my family and me. Weddings were supposed to be happy, right? A celebration of love, the beginning of a new chapter. But that day, the day that was supposed to bring joy, turned into the day my entire world unraveled. Andrew's wedding was a grand affair. Lavish, extravagant, just as I had expected. The venue was a sprawling estate in Virginia, nestled between towering oak trees, with a garden that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Over 300 guests attended, most of them people I didn't even recognize, but they were all there to see the high-profile lawyer marry his perfect match. The bride, Sophie, was a vision in white, her gown adorned with intricate lace that shimmered under the chandeliers. She was stunning, the epitome of grace and elegance, but, as I would soon discover, appearances can be deceiving. I had assumed foolishly that my role as the sister of the groom would be honored in the way it should be. I had spent the weeks leading up to the wedding helping with details, picking out flower arrangements, making sure everything was in place. It seemed only natural that I would be included in the most important parts of the ceremony. After all, I was family. But when the invitations were sent out, I received mine in the mail and immediately noticed something odd. My name was nowhere to be found on the list of VIP guests, the ones who would sit in the front row at the ceremony, the ones who would be acknowledged in the speeches. Instead, I was placed at a table near the back with distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. It stung, but I told myself to let it go. This was Andrew's day, after all. Maybe he didn't want to make a big deal out of it, but the feeling in my gut told me something was off. The ceremony began, and everything looked like a picture-perfect wedding. But when it was time for the reception, everything went downhill. As we filed into the reception hall, I found my seat at the farthest corner of the room, behind a row of large plants and far from the stage. It felt like a joke. My own brother, the man I had helped raise, had relegated me to this forgotten corner of his most important day. But what hurt the most was what happened next. After the first round of speeches, Sophie took the microphone to thank everyone for coming. Her voice, as sweet and polished as her appearance, echoed through the hall. I'd like to take a moment to thank my family for being here, and especially to thank Andrew for making this day possible, she said, her smile dazzling. And of course, a special thank you to my mother, who has been a guiding light in my life. I watched from my seat, feeling like a ghost in the room, when Sophie added something that made my blood run cold. And last but certainly not least, Sophie continued, her eyes scanning the crowd. I'd like to thank my new brother-in-law, Andrew's sister, Emily, for all her hard work and support. It's been such a pleasure to have her involved in our wedding preparations, even if she's just the assistant to the real professionals. The word assistant hung in the air like a slap. It wasn't the thank you that stung, it was the dismissive way she said it. Like I didn't matter, like I was just a side character in a story that wasn't mine. The room erupted in polite applause, and I felt my heart sink. Sophie had made it clear to everyone that I was the little sister, the insignificant one, just helping with the small things. But it didn't end there. Later, during the gift exchange, things got even worse. Guests were asked to place their gifts on a table for Sophie and Andrew to open later. I stood near the back, holding my breath as my brother opened one extravagant present after another. An all-expenses-paid trip to Paris from his business partners, a brand-new Porsche from his law firm, a jewelry set worth over $50,000 from one of their friends. I'd spent weeks trying to find something meaningful to give them, something that could show them how much I cared. I'd saved for months to buy them a custom-made painting of the house they'd just bought. It was a simple gift, nothing extravagant, but it came from my heart. When the moment came for them to open my gift, I stood frozen in place. Andrew unwrapped the canvas, smiled half-heartedly, and handed it off to one of his friends without even looking at it properly. "Thanks, Em. We'll hang it up in the guest room," he said, his words almost automatic. But it was Sophie's comment that pierced me like a knife. "Oh, it's cute," she said, clearly disappointed. "But I think we'll be fine with the framed prints we already have. I didn't even know you could paint." I felt my face flush with embarrassment. The weight of the moment settled over me like a cloud. I'd been so foolish to think that my efforts meant anything at all. It was all just a game to them, me, my time, my money. Everything I had given was easily discarded. I felt invisible, irrelevant. That night, after the party, I retreated to my room, locking the door behind me. I tried to hold it together, but the tears came, the sobs that I couldn't suppress. Why had I worked so hard for this family? Why had I allowed myself to be pushed aside for so long? The next day, I found out that I had been left out of the final family will altogether, replaced by Andrew as the sole heir to my father's business. My $50,000 personal expenses inheritance was just a cruel afterthought, a slap in the face after everything I had done for this family. And in that moment, I realized that Andrew wasn't just taking over the business, he was taking over my life. The truth hit me like a freight train. I had been the joke, the assistant, the little sister who would never be enough. But it was at that moment that something inside me shifted. The hurt was still there, but beneath it was a spark, a glimmer of something more. I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't let this be my story anymore. That night, I made a vow to myself. I would take control of my life. I would build something for me. I didn't know how, but I would make it happen. And as I stood there watching the wedding guests celebrate, I knew one thing for certain. I would never let anyone make me feel small again. The first reaction, silence and hurt. For weeks, I didn't say a word. Not to Andrew, not to anyone. I became a ghost in my own life, walking through the motions, speaking only when necessary. The silence was suffocating, but it was the only thing that seemed to make sense. I felt betrayed in ways I didn't know how to articulate. I didn't know where to start, where to even begin untangling the mess that had become my life. After the wedding, I avoided contact with Andrew. It was easy to do. He was caught up in the whirlwind of his new life with Sophie. The high society crowd, the constant congratulations, and the ever-present smugness in his voice whenever he spoke about his new ventures. He was the perfect picture of success, surrounded by people who praised him endlessly, while I was the invisible sister, just a footnote in his story. My parents, of course, pretended everything was fine. They didn't see the injustice of what had happened. To them, Andrew had done nothing wrong. He was their golden boy, and whatever he did was justified. It was always like that. From the very beginning, Andrew was the one who got the praise, the recognition, the opportunities. I was just the one who supported him quietly in the background. I remember, years ago when I'd first started helping my father with the family business. I was just a teenager, but I had an understanding of the financial reports, the spreadsheets, the logistics. It was all second nature to me. But Andrew, he had no interest. He was too busy with his law school studies and his social life. My father would often joke, "Emily is the one who'll take over one day." I remember how proud I felt at those moments, how I thought that one day I would be the one to carry the family legacy forward. But that wasn't meant to be. When the will was read, the truth hit me hard. The business, everything I had worked for, was now Andrew's. The 50,000 inheritance was just an insult, a pittance, a gesture that was so small it made me feel invisible, insignificant. It wasn't even enough to pay off my student loans, let alone start anything new. It felt like a cruel joke, but that's all it was, wasn't it? A joke to them. I had spent years believing that my contributions, my sacrifice, mattered, but none of it had. It wasn't just about the money. It was about the years of being overlooked, of being dismissed. It was about the countless moments when I was told I wasn't enough, that my role in this family would always be secondary to Andrew's. Every time I helped my father with the books, every time I pored over numbers and helped draft proposals, it was all in the background. No one ever acknowledged it. No one ever said, "Thank you, Emily, you're doing something important." The real hurt wasn't the money, it was the realization that I had never mattered enough to be seen, that no matter how hard I worked, I was always going to be just Emily. And that moment at the wedding, when Sophie dismissed me like I was nothing, was the final straw. She had always been condescending, but to publicly dismiss me like that in front of everyone, my family, the guests, everyone, was a slap in the face I couldn't ignore. So I stayed silent. For weeks, I didn't call anyone. I didn't reach out to Andrew, I didn't visit my parents. I just sat in my apartment staring at the walls, letting the silence fill the spaces where my words should have been. The hurt grew, but so did the anger. It wasn't just about the business, it was about the years I had spent trying to prove myself, the way I had sacrificed so much of my life for this family. I had been there for every birthday, every holiday, every family gathering. I had put them first, always. And yet, when it came down to it, I was nothing more than an afterthought. I couldn't keep pretending. The numbness I had been feeling started to crack, and beneath it was a raw, searing pain. I began to question everything, my life, my choices, the people I had trusted. I could no longer pretend to be fine with the way things were. I had to make a change. One night, after a particularly long day of work, I found myself staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I hated what I saw. My eyes were tired, dull from weeks of sleepless nights and emotional turmoil. My hair, once neatly styled, was now pulled back in a hasty bun. I looked older, more worn than I felt, but the anger inside me wouldn't let me look away. "You've worked for this," I whispered to my reflection, my voice barely audible. "You deserve more than this." The words hung in the air, almost mocking me. They were true, but they didn't feel true. I didn't feel deserving. I felt like a failure. I had given everything to this family, and for what? To be left with nothing? It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about the constant dismissal, the way I had been made to feel small for so long. Every time my father praised Andrew, every time my mother looked at me with that disappointed smile, I had felt it. The weight of being overlooked. And now, after all these years of bending over backward for them, I was left with a measly $50,000 and a lifetime of resentment. That night, I did something I never thought I would do. I sat down at my computer, opened my email, and typed out a message to my lawyer. I didn't know exactly what I was asking for, but I knew I had to do something. "How can I buy Andrew out of the business?" I typed. My fingers hovered over the keys for a moment, then I hit send. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I knew it wouldn't be easy. I didn't have the capital, and I didn't know where to start. But it didn't matter. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of determination. But even as I hit send, I was filled with doubt. Was this the right thing to do? Was I just running away from my family, from everything I had worked for? Or was this the beginning of something new, something I could finally call my own? I didn't know the answer yet, but I knew one thing for certain. I couldn't stay silent anymore. It was time to fight for myself. The plot twist, a surprising opportunity. 6 months after the shock of the will, after the betrayal, and after the hollow 50,000 that did nothing to fill the void inside me, I was still struggling. I was working at a marketing firm, but I felt like a prisoner in my own life. Every day felt like a slow drag, a constant reminder of how far I had fallen. I had no control over my future. My father's business, the thing I had poured so much of myself into for years, was now under Andrew's careless watch, and I was left with a meager salary at a company where I felt invisible. That morning, as I sat at my desk, typing up yet another report for a client I didn't care about, my phone buzzed. It was an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, but something made me pick up. I was numb, but curiosity still managed to poke through. "Emily?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but with an undertone of something important. "This is Jonathan. I'm with X Solutions, a venture capital firm. We've been following your work at the marketing firm. I'm impressed with your knowledge of the industry, and we'd like to offer you an investment in your own company." At first, I thought it was some kind of prank. There was no way anyone would be interested in me, especially not after everything that had happened. I had no connections, no credibility, nothing, but Jonathan wasn't joking. He was serious. "I'm sorry, but you must be mistaken," I said, unsure of what was happening. "I'm just a marketing executive at a firm. I don't have my own company." Jonathan didn't hesitate. "We've seen your work, Emily. You've been leading major campaigns, you understand the market, and you have a clear vision. We'd like to help you take that vision and turn it into something bigger. We're offering you $1 million in funding to start your own company." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the room was spinning. $1 million? Me? $1 million to start a business of my own? It didn't seem possible. But the seriousness in Jonathan's voice told me this wasn't some kind of elaborate joke. He wasn't asking for anything in return at the moment. He was simply offering the chance for something new. We set up a meeting, and I was shaken by how quickly things progressed. Over the next few months, I met with Jonathan several times. I pitched him my ideas, shared my vision for a marketing firm that wasn't just about making money, but about truly understanding people and businesses. There were moments when I doubted myself, moments when I thought I was just playing pretend, and they'd find out I didn't belong. But the deal went through. $1 million in funding was secured, and I was now the founder of my own company. The moment I signed the papers, it felt like the weight of the world had lifted off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control over something in my life. It was terrifying, exhilarating, and surreal all at once. But there was something else that was stirring deep inside me, a thought that, until that moment, I hadn't allowed myself to entertain. What if I bought my father's business? The thought hit me like a rush of adrenaline. With the money I now had, I could do it. I could take back what was rightfully mine, what I'd worked for all these years. I could make my own place in the world, separate from the legacy my brother now held onto so tightly. The idea was intoxicating. I couldn't shake it. But I also couldn't ignore the guilt gnawing at me. This wasn't just a business. This was family. This was my father's legacy. Could I really take it from Andrew, even though he didn't deserve it? Could I build something so big, so important, and still keep my humanity intact? I decided to sit on the idea for a few days. I didn't want to make a decision out of anger or spite. I'd worked so hard to build myself up again, to stand on my own. But the pull of the business, of taking back what I had lost, was too strong to ignore. And that's when everything changed. It was a week later when I received an invitation to Andrew's and Sophie's anniversary party. At first, I considered not going. I had distanced myself from them for months. But I couldn't shake the thought of showing up, standing there as a different version of myself. I wanted them to see who I had become. I wanted to show them that I wasn't the same Emily they had dismissed so easily. The night of the party arrived. I was nervous but excited. I put on a new dress, one that felt different, more confident, more like who I was now, not who I used to be. I arrived at the venue, a grand ballroom with sparkling chandeliers and an expensive, extravagant setup. Andrew and Sophie were the center of attention, as usual, but I could feel the tension in the air. I wasn't sure why, but I had a feeling that something was going to happen. As the evening wore on, I found myself drifting away from the crowd. I needed a break from the fawning guests and the never-ending praise directed at Andrew. I stepped outside into the cool night air, trying to collect my thoughts. That's when my nephew, Ben, came running up to me. Ben was only 9 years old, but he had a sharpness to him that often caught me off guard. He had always been close to me, and I adored him. He was always so honest, so unafraid to speak his mind. "Emily," he said, tugging at my sleeve, "can I talk to you for a second?" "Of course, Ben," I said, smiling down at him. "What's going on?" He looked around nervously, then leaned in close. "I know something," he whispered. "Something I'm not supposed to know." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" Ben glanced over his shoulder, ensuring no one was watching. Then in a low voice he said, I heard Andrew talking to Dad. He doesn't care about the business. He never did. He's just pretending. He said he was going to sell it soon and take the money for himself. He didn't even want it in the first place. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? Are you sure? I'm sure, Ben said, nodding. I heard him. He said he didn't care about it. He just wants to make the money and leave it all behind. He doesn't want to run it, and he doesn't want you to have it either. I stood there, stunned. This was the bombshell I'd been waiting for. This was the truth I'd been missing. All along, Andrew hadn't wanted the business at all. He had only taken it because it was there, because it was the family legacy. But now that he had it, he didn't care what happened to it. He was going to sell it and cash in. I was furious, but more than that, I was filled with a strange sense of relief. The pieces were finally falling into place. I knew what I had to do now. I had to take back what was mine. I didn't waste any time. I found Andrew later in the evening in the midst of the party, surrounded by people. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't invisible anymore. I walked up to him calmly and said the words I had been holding back for so long. Andrew, I know you don't care about the business. I know you're planning to sell it. His face froze, a look of surprise flickering in his eyes. What are you talking about? You can't hide it anymore, I said, my voice steady. I'm going to buy the business. It's mine now. The room fell silent. Sophie, who had been standing nearby, gasped. The guests looked at us, stunned. But the look on Andrew's face was priceless. Shock, anger, and something else I couldn't quite place. It was as if I had shattered his carefully constructed world in one sentence. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. I had taken control. And no one could take that away from me. Confrontation, setting boundaries. A few months later, I did exactly what I had planned. I bought my father's business from Andrew. It wasn't easy. He fought me every step of the way. I'd secured the funds with the help of investors. But Andrew, as expected, tried every trick in the book to stop me, to convince me to sell my shares, to back down. He couldn't accept the fact that I was now in control, that I had reclaimed what I was always meant to have. It was late one evening when we sat in the conference room, the place that had once felt like home. The walls, adorned with photographs of my father, now felt colder, more distant. The weight of the past was still heavy on my shoulders, but for the first time in a long while, I felt something different, a sense of power, of reclaiming my own future. Emily, you don't know what you're doing. You're going to ruin everything, Andrew said, his voice trembling with a mixture of anger and desperation. This is my company now. It was Dad's wish. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. My gaze never wavered from his. The words, the same ones he had used for months, didn't carry the same weight anymore. They didn't scare me. Andrew, I said slowly, this was never your company. You don't get to decide who deserves it. I do. I've earned this, and I'm not letting you make me feel small anymore. His face twisted with disbelief. For the first time, I saw it. Real fear in his eyes. It was the fear of losing control, of seeing someone else take the reins. For all the years he had belittled me, ignored my contributions, and taken the easy path, he had never once thought I would stand up for myself. He had never once thought that I might actually fight for what was mine. You think you've earned it? He scoffed, pacing around the room. You didn't do anything, Emily. All you did was sit around and play at being part of this family. You weren't around when it mattered. You didn't make the tough calls. You didn't do what I did. You're just a kid trying to play in an adult's world. I stood up now, matching his pace, refusing to let him intimidate me. The years of silence, the resentment I had kept buried for so long, came rushing to the surface. You don't get to speak to me like that anymore, I said, my voice firm but controlled. You're not the only one who worked hard for this. You think it was easy for me being shoved aside every time something important came up. You think it didn't hurt when Dad handed you the business without a second thought. I've been here, Andrew. I've been working alongside you, sacrificing my time, my energy, my dignity, while you treated me like a shadow. Well, I'm done being in your shadow. I'm done playing by your rules. He stopped pacing and faced me, his expression darkening. You think you can do this on your own. You think you can run this company without me. You're nothing without me, Emily. You'll fail. You'll fail just like everyone thought you would. The words stung, but they no longer had the same power. I had heard those words too many times over the years. I had internalized them for far too long, but I was done with that. I had learned that I wasn't just someone's second choice. I wasn't just someone who had to quietly follow the path laid out for me. I had the right to carve my own path, and I would not let Andrew or anyone else define me. I don't need you, Andrew, I said quietly, my voice steady. Not anymore. I have my own team. My own investors, my own vision. I'm not relying on you to tell me what to do, and I'm not going to sit here and listen to you belittle me anymore. Andrew's face twisted in frustration, his hands clenching into fists. You think you can just waltz in and take over? You think you can undo everything I've built? You're going to regret this. I'll make sure of it. I met his glare without flinching. I'm not the one who's going to regret anything. You are. You were never interested in this business. You never cared about it. You never cared about Dad's legacy. You only cared about the power, the money, and the status it gave you. I'm doing this for the family. For Dad, I'm doing this for what we could have been, and I'm not going to let you destroy it just to satisfy your ego. There was a long, tense silence between us. Andrew was seething, his chest heaving with anger. I could feel the weight of the confrontation pressing down on me, but I held my ground. I wasn't going to back down anymore. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and cold. You'll regret this, Emily, and you'll regret cutting me out. But his words didn't carry the same power they once had. I knew that now. He was bluffing, trying to intimidate me, but I could see through it. He was scared, and that fear was a reflection of how far I had come. I won't regret it, I said softly, the finality of my words hanging in the air. You've already taken everything from me, Andrew. You've already tried to break me. But I'm still standing, and I'm not going to let you destroy everything Dad built just because you're too selfish to see what matters. His face was a mask of rage, but there was nothing he could do. The battle was over, and he had lost. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. I had set my boundaries. I had taken control of my life, and no one, especially Andrew, could take that away from me. As I walked out of the conference room, I could feel the eyes of the staff on me, but I didn't care. I had made my decision. I had drawn the line, and I was no longer going to be anyone's doormat. I had learned the hard way, but I was stronger now, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt free. Andrew, on the other hand, was left standing there, his fists still clenched, his face pale with fury. But he had no power anymore. Not over me, not over this company, not over my future, and that was the sweetest victory of all. The open ending, finding my own value. Now, the company is mine. I run it. I've doubled its value in the last 2 years, generating millions in revenue. The office is sleek, filled with high-end furniture and cutting-edge technology, and the hustle of the workday swirls around me in a constant buzz of productivity. I sign contracts with the same hand that once trembled in fear of what might come next. I manage teams now, not just as a boss, but as a leader who has earned the right to be there. Yet sometimes, on the quiet days when the office is still, when the city lights outside flicker like distant stars, I wonder, why did I let it get to this point? Why did I let people, especially my own family, make me feel worthless for so long? Why did I wait until I had nothing left but sheer defiance to claim what was rightfully mine? I paused, staring out the window at the skyline, my reflection merging with the lights below. How often do we let ourselves be defined by others, by their expectations, by the roles they impose on us? I spent so many years, so many days in the shadows of family expectations, never once questioning my worth, never once standing up for myself. My value was measured by what I could give, what I could provide, and by what others thought I should be, and for so long, I let that be enough. But now, I see things differently. The value of a person isn't determined by the family they come from, the job they hold, or the wealth they inherit. It's not about the legacy we're handed, but the choices we make along the way. It's about how we rise after every fall, how we build ourselves up when the world, or the people we love, try to tear us down. And today, I choose to be the one who decides my future, not anyone else. Do you ever feel like you're just one decision away from everything changing? I did. And in that moment, I realized that everything I had been seeking, acceptance, approval, validation, was never going to come from the people who had always overlooked me. It had to come from within. It had to come from me, so I made the decision to stop waiting for their approval. I stopped waiting for them to recognize my worth, and in doing so, I finally recognized it for myself. But here's the thing I've learned. When you stop seeking validation from others, it can be incredibly freeing, but it's also terrifying. The road ahead is yours to walk alone. And the only person who can give you permission to succeed or fail is you. In some ways, that's the hardest part, but it's also the most empowering. So, I ask you, what's stopping you from choosing your own path? Is it fear? Fear of rejection, of failure, of being judged? I've been there. I've been afraid. I've been scared that I wasn't enough. But I've learned that the only way to truly live is to stop asking for permission, stop waiting for the approval of others, stop measuring your worth based on the standards they set for you. Would you have the courage to take that step, to walk away from what's familiar, to say no to the people who've always tried to define you, and say yes to yourself? It's not easy. It might even feel impossible at first. But I can tell you this. Once you take that first step toward reclaiming your own life, you'll never look back. Now, when I see my reflection, I don't see the girl who was afraid to speak up, who was afraid to stand her ground. I see a woman who chose herself, a woman who said, I am enough, I am worthy, and I will not let anyone, not even my own blood, take that from me. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest victory of all. But I want to leave you with this question. When it's your turn to make that choice, when the moment comes that will define the rest of your life, will you choose to live for yourself, or will you keep waiting for someone else to tell you that it's okay? The choice is yours, and I hope, for your sake, you choose yourself, because you are worth it.